A 12-year-old black boy was accused of cheating by his teacher. But what happened next changed an entire school forever. The morning bell at Riverside Middle School rang with a bright, metallic cheer that never quite matched the mood of Monday. Marcus Williams coasted up to the bike rack, the chain whispering along his rear wheel until he braked, swung a leg off, and crouched to loop his U-lock through the frame. He tugged twice to make sure it was secure, the way his grandmother had taught him. Twice as careful, 3 times as prepared. That was the rule. Inside his backpack, everything had a place. Blue folder for math, red for science, yellow for ELA, green for social studies. His pencils were sharpened to identical points. His brand-new scientific calculator, bought with 3 months of allowance plus a few weekends mowing Mr. Davenport's lawn, sat snug in a hard case. The calculator wasn't fancy by some kids' standards, but to Marcus it was like a key to a quiet room where numbers made sense and no one asked who you were before they let you in. The hallways were already busy, a burst of laughter by the trophy case, the hollow slam of lockers, a breeze of cafeteria air that carried cinnamon and tater tots at the same time. Near the second-floor stairwell, Marcus heard a hushed, clipped whisper, "There he is," before it died as quickly as it had come. He didn't turn to see who said it. He kept walking, palms dry, eyes forward, counting the tiles from the stair landing to room 247 like he always did. 12 dark tiles, then 8 light ones, then the scuffed gray threshold of his favorite classroom. Mr. Gregory Peterson stood behind his desk with his hands resting lightly on the edge, knuckles pale, like he was holding a piano note that didn't belong to the song. He was tall in a way that made the room feel smaller. A tie knotted a little too perfectly, hair gray at the temples, the kind of posture that projected discipline without having to say the word. On the walls, geometric solids perched in neat parade, triangles marched across laminated posters, and a clean whiteboard stretched like a blank runway waiting for flight. "Good morning, Mr. Peterson," Marcus said, careful and polite, the way his grandmother liked him to be with adults who hadn't yet decided what they thought of him. Mr. Peterson looked up. His eyes took Marcus in, shirt tucked, notebook already out, then moved on without a smile. "Good morning, Mr. Williams," he said. "Take your seat. We'll speak after class about your last assessment." A bead of disbelief pricked the back of Marcus's neck. His last assessment had a red-circled 98 at the top, highest in the class. Maybe Mr. Peterson wanted to congratulate him. The thought flickered and went out. Sarah Chen slid into the chair beside him and flashed a quick smile, the kind that meant we survived Monday morning, didn't we? She opened her spiral notebook and nudged her pencil toward Marcus's desk. "You ready for the quadratic review?" she whispered. Before Marcus could answer, the intercom clicked alive. "Good morning, Riverside," said Principal Robert Hayes, his voice warm and steady like it had been poured through a filter that removed all the scratch from a bad day. Announcements rolled through. Science fair timeline, extended library hours, reminders about academic integrity. Marcus didn't think much about the last part. He didn't need to. He studied, and the numbers gave back what he put in. When the intercom clicked off, the classroom seemed to exhale. Mr. Peterson capped a marker and set it in a row of identical colors arranged by shade. "Academic integrity," he repeated, as if tasting the phrase for sour notes. "Timely." His gaze traveled across the rows, front, middle, back, like a searchlight that had already chosen what it hoped to find. "We'll open with a short talk," he said, "before today's lesson." He paced between the first and second rows, fingertips kissing the edges of desks, a habit that suggested he preferred things square. "In recent assessments," he continued, "I've observed some surprising outcomes. When performance deviates notably from a student's established profile, it raises questions. Questions about whether the work is truly their own. The room's sound softened paper, breath, a cough swallowed. Marcus could feel the shape of everyone's attention changing. He kept his eyes on the header he'd written in careful block letters, Quadratics, Day 2, but the pencil in his hand went still. Mr. Peterson stopped beside Marcus's desk. The smell of dry erase marker hovered between them. "Mr. Williams," he said, voice even, not loud enough for the hallway, but loud enough for the row. "Please, gather your materials and wait in the hall." Marcus lifted his eyes. "Sir?" The single syllable landed small. "We'll have a private discussion about your academic honesty after I teach this lesson to the students who have earned their place in this advanced course." The sentence didn't shout. It didn't need to. A chair squeaked. Someone's breath caught. Sarah's pencil halted on the page, a black dot thickening like spilled ink. Marcus began, and then stopped because the next words didn't know where to go. His face heated. His fingers felt too big for the zipper on his backpack. It snagged. He tugged too hard. The teeth chattered and held. He tried again. The calculator case slid off the desk and clattered to the tile with a small metallic smack that sounded, in the silence, like a dropped plate. "Leave it," Mr. Peterson said. "You won't be needing it." Marcus left it. The hallway outside was cooler, the kind of chill that lives in schools no matter the season. He sat with his back against the painted cinder block, drawing his knees up just enough to balance the notebook on his thighs. He didn't cry. His grandmother's voice was a braid wrapped around his ribs. "Don't you let them see you cry. Not here. Not like this. You hold your head high and know what you know." He pulled the graded test from his folder. The red 98 didn't glow the way it had last night at the kitchen table under the cone of light where his grandmother had said, "That's my boy," and kissed the top of his head with the quick efficiency of a woman who had never had time to be slow. He traced the steps of problem 6 with his finger, the pattern he had noticed, the shortcut he had checked 3 times because it felt like a gift, and he wanted to be sure it was real. A set of footsteps approached, unhurried, confident. Marcus didn't look up until a shadow fell across his notebook. "Marcus," said Principal Hayes, the warmth in his tone not a performance, but a habit. He wore a gray suit that fit without pinching, a tie with a small, precise knot, and the kind of expression that took students in and didn't rush to decide. "Why are you out here, son?" Marcus's throat worked. The hallway swallowed sound differently than the classroom. Words seemed to slide along the floor. "Mr. Peterson asked me to wait," he said. The details came out in pieces. Surprising outcomes. Questions about honesty. Wait in the hall. The calculator on the floor like a coin he hadn't earned. "Did he present any evidence?" Dr. Hayes asked. "Something specific about your work?" "No, sir," Marcus said. "He said my scores were unexpected." Dr. Hayes glanced through the door's small window. Inside, Mr. Peterson had already turned to the board, marker poised, a triangle of neat letters and numbers forming under his hand. The principal's jaw tendened for a second, a muscle ticking and then smoothing like a wrinkle pressed out with a finger. "Marcus," he said softly, "you have done nothing wrong. Do you understand me?" He waited for an answer, not because he doubted, but because he wanted Marcus to hear himself say it. "Yes, sir," Marcus said, and the words were small, but they held. "Good." Dr. Hayes took one step toward the door and one back, deciding. "Go to the library. Ask Mrs. Chen for study room B. Tell her I sent you. Bring your math materials. I'll have your classwork forwarded." His voice didn't harden, but it acquired a spine. I will address this." Marcus hesitated only long enough to gather his backpack. The calculator case lay just inside the classroom door. He reached for it out of reflex, then stopped, left it where it had fallen, and went down the hallway with his chin level, counting door numbers like prayer beads. Dr. Hayes smoothed his tie, drew a steady breath, and opened the door to room 247. He didn't make an entrance. He stepped in the way someone steps into their own kitchen in the dark, knowing the shape of things. The students saw him first, bodies straightened, eyes sharpened. Mr. Peterson's marker paused at the apex of a drawn parabola. The line kept its curve, obedient to the math. "Please continue," Dr. Hayes said pleasantly, taking the open seat in the back, Marcus's seat as it happened. "I'm here for my scheduled observation." A filament of surprise flashed across Mr. Peterson's face and went out. "Of course, Dr. Hayes," he said, "we're reviewing applications of the quadratic formula." For 20 minutes, the principal watched. Mr. Peterson's command of content was clear. His examples were crisp. His board work was choreography. If teaching were only proof and procedure, the man could have taught forever. But Dr. Hayes wasn't counting markers. He was measuring the room. He noticed who raised a hand quickly and who didn't risk it. He noticed that when Emily Anderson struggled, Mr. Peterson's voice softened to encouragement, walked with her to the step she'd missed, and set her gently back on the path. He noticed that when Brian Tucker fumbled, the patience thinned like a shirt worn through at the elbows. He noticed that Sarah Chen's hand hovered often, that it was not called upon, that Jamal Brooks's hand hovered less, perhaps because it had learned to. "Mr. Peterson," Dr. Hayes said finally, when the teacher asked for a volunteer to solve a more complex example, "I notice Miss Chen has been waiting. Perhaps she could demonstrate her approach." Mr. Peterson's mouth made a narrow line that might have been a smile in another setting. "Very well. Miss Chen." Sarah stood, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and went to the board. She didn't perform. She showed her thinking cleanly, left margins of breath between steps so the class could follow. When she finished, the solution rested on the board like a well-built bridge. "Excellent work, Miss Chen," Dr. Hayes said. "Where did you first see that particular shortcut?" Sarah looked down at the marker in her hand, then up. Truth and fear met in her throat. "Marcus showed me, sir," she said, "when we studied together." Silence found a chair. Dr. Hayes nodded slowly, as if some variable he'd been tracking had just resolved. He turned his attention to Mr. Peterson. "You sent Marcus Williams into the hallway this period," he said, the sentence not an accusation but an accounting. "You indicated concerns about his integrity." Mr. Peterson's ears reddened slightly. "I intended to address the matter privately, yes," he said. "His recent scores represent an anomalous jump." "An anomaly," Dr. Hayes repeated, tasting the word, "can be a problem or a discovery, depending on whether you've already decided what you're looking at." He offered Mr. Peterson a small, neutral smile. "Please continue your lesson. I'll stop by your room afterward." He did not need to say, "We will talk." The future tense did that on its own. In the hallway again, the bell sliced the period. Dr. Hayes stepped aside as students spilled out in kinetic clusters, high and low voices crisscrossing like birds. A few eyes cut toward him with the quick curiosity kids reserve for adult collisions they don't yet understand. He waited for the traffic to thin, then stood at the threshold until Mr. Peterson erased the last stroke from the board and turned. "Walk with me," Dr. Hayes said. They moved through the corridor at a pace that was not fast. Dr. Hayes did not like to rush through things he intended to do carefully. They passed the counseling office, posters about kindness in bright fonts, a bowl of mints that was always less full than it looked. In the main office, Dr. Hayes paused only long enough to say to his assistant, "Please have Marcus Williams' cumulative file on my desk within the hour, and tell Mrs. Chen I'll be sending work to study room B." His voice didn't sharpen, but the edges would have cut paper. In his office, Dr. Hayes did not go behind the desk. He took the chair opposite the guest chair so the furniture couldn't do any of the power work the conversation would be asked to do. Mr. Peterson sat, posture still precise, eyes on an imaginary horizon just past the principal's left shoulder. "Before we begin," Dr. Hayes said, "this conversation will be documented. It may become part of a formal personnel process." He let the sentence land and be what it was. "I'd like to understand the basis for your decision to remove a student from an advanced class with a public statement about academic honesty." "As I said," Mr. Peterson replied, "the statistical deviation is 6 points between 2 assessments in a new teacher's class," Dr. Hayes said, voice even, "a common variance for a highly capable student adjusting to a new instructor's testing style. You also had, by your own account, no specific evidence of dishonesty." Mr. Peterson's jaw moved as if working a piece of tough gristle. "I'm vigilant about standards," he said. "As am I," Dr. Hayes replied. He let a beat pass. "We also have standards for how we treat children." Mr. Peterson's hands tightened on the armrests until the leather creaked. This isn't about race." Dr. Hayes's eyebrows flicked, a gesture so small it barely existed. "I didn't say it was," he said softly. "But I have eyes and data. I watched your room. I saw who you called on and how and when. I saw whose struggle drew your generosity and whose drew your impatience. I saw one brilliant boy reduced for 20 minutes to a concern." Mr. Peterson's gaze dropped to the carpet's neat pattern, squares inside squares. "Marcus Williams has a documented history of high mathematical achievement," Dr. Hayes continued. "I know because I hired his previous math teacher, Miss Rodriguez, and because I do not wait to learn about my best students from crisis. He is not new to excellence. He is new to being your student." A silence followed that wasn't empty. It filled with the things neither man was ready to say directly, the way a cup fills when a stream steadies. Dr. Hayes stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point. "You will finish your next class," he said, "and then you will meet me in the library. You will apologize to Marcus. You will do so without qualifiers. You will name what you did, and then we will discuss how you intend to repair what can be repaired." Mr. Peterson opened his mouth and closed it, an unvoiced defense evaporating on his tongue. He nodded once, the movement small, like a hinge that hadn't turned in a while. When he left, Dr. Hayes remained standing for a moment, palms on the cool windowsill, looking out at the courtyard where a 7th-grade PE class moved like a flock. Scatter, reform, scatter, reform, under a sky so clear it felt like a verdict. He drew a breath that went all the way down, then turned to his desk and the stack that had already been set there. Folders, a phone message from a parent about bus route changes, the weightless work that held schools together each day. On top, he placed a sticky note. Marcus W. Follow-up. He underlined it once. In the library, Mrs. Chen adjusted her glasses when Dr. Hayes stopped by the desk. "Study room B," she said before he could ask. "He's been working this whole time." Her expression softened and sharpened in the same moment. "He's a good kid." "I know," Dr. Hayes said. "Thank you, Linda." Inside study room B, the hum of fluorescent lights made a faint, steady ribbon of sound. Marcus had spread his papers just so. Done work here, scratch there, book open to a page he'd dog-eared even though his grandmother hated dog ears. The red 98 lay in the corner like a lighthouse he wasn't sure he could trust. He stared at the white of the paper until the numbers lifted in relief again, steps he could run his mind across with his eyes closed. He didn't hear the door open until the hinge murmured. He looked up and saw both men. Dr. Hayes first, face composed, and behind him, Mr. Peterson, something stripped from his expression that had made it rigid before. "Marcus," Dr. Hayes said, voice gentle, "Mr. Peterson has something to say to you." He didn't push the teacher forward, but the expectation moved like air. Mr. Peterson sat rather than stand, which mattered. He placed his hands on the table where Marcus could see they were empty. "Marcus," he said, and then cleared his throat because the name caught. "I owe you an apology. I questioned your integrity without evidence. I embarrassed you in front of your classmates. I allowed my assumptions about what excellence looks like to override my responsibility to examine the work in front of me. I was wrong." He stopped. The room's hum did not. Marcus's eyes stayed on his face, measuring. "I don't expect you to forgive me because I've said these words," Mr. Peterson continued. "I expect to earn back whatever I can by what I do next." His voice thinned briefly, then steadied. "Your work on that assessment is excellent. If you're willing, I'd like to see how you approached Problem 6. But only if you'd like to show me." Marcus sat very still for a moment, as if listening to something inside that wasn't yet loud enough to hear. Then he slid the paper forward. "I noticed something," he said, and when he began to explain it, calmly, precisely, the way a person explains a map he has walked, his voice found the register it always held when he was inside the part of the world that made sense. Mr. Peterson listened. Really listened. His face changed in the way faces do when understanding finds the part of the mind that had insisted it wasn't lost. Dr. Hayes watched both of them, the boy and the man, and let himself breathe. It was not resolution. It was a beginning, which, in his experience, was the only honest way stories like this could end a first chapter. When Marcus finished, he folded his hands and waited, not for praise, but for proof that the adult across from him had truly heard him. "Thank you," Mr. Peterson said quietly. "I would like you back in my classroom tomorrow." He swallowed. "And I will address the class before we begin." Dr. Hayes nodded once. "Marcus," he said, "your assignments will be sent here for today. If you need anything, Mrs. Chen knows how to reach me." Marcus gathered his papers into a neat stack, edges squared, corners aligned. "Yes, sir." As the principal and teacher stepped back into the hallway, the door whispering shut, Dr. Hayes spoke low enough that it didn't carry. "You will not make me have this conversation twice," he said. "I understand," Mr. Peterson replied, and for the first time since second period, the understanding sounded like it came from somewhere deeper than policy. Down the hall, the bell rang again, releasing and catching the building in its rhythmic net. In study room B, Marcus unzipped his pencil pouch and sharpened a dull number 2, the shavings curling like thin wood ribbon into the plastic cap. He set the newly sharpened pencil on the margin of his paper and wrote, in small, steady letters at the top of a fresh page, "Quadratics, practice." Then he began. The following morning at Riverside Middle School began like any other. Bright corridors echoing with sneakers, lockers slamming in sync with laughter. But for Dr. Robert Hayes, the day already carried a particular weight. The events of yesterday still sat heavy in his mind. A talented 12-year-old had been publicly accused of cheating, not because of evidence, but because his excellence was unexpected. Hayes had seen this before, too many times. Different teachers, different faces, same pattern. Bias often hid behind words like anomaly and discipline. It was never overt, just quiet enough to be called concern. By 8:20 a.m., he was standing outside room 247 with his clipboard tucked under one arm. He wasn't here for a formal evaluation, though that's what it would look like to anyone watching. This was about something deeper than pedagogy or test scores. It was about fairness. It was about a boy who deserved to be seen. The door clicked open just as the bell rang. Mr. Peterson turned sharply, then straightened when he saw who stood there. "Dr. Hayes," he said, polite but uneasy. "I didn't realize you'd scheduled a visit today." "I didn't," Hayes replied evenly, stepping inside. "Consider it an observation for professional growth." Peterson hesitated. "Of course." The students filed in, most unaware of the storm hovering just above their heads. Marcus's seat in the third row remained empty. Sarah Chen glanced at it more than once, her pencil tapping nervously against her notebook. Jamal Brooks slouched lower in his chair, trying to stay invisible. Hayes sat in the back corner, quietly taking notes. He didn't write much, just short phrases, fragments that said everything: who gets called on, tone shifts, eye contact, respect. Peterson began the lesson with mechanical precision. "Today, we'll continue our work on quadratic equations," he said, turning to the board. "Let's start with a warm-up problem." He called on Emily Anderson, white, confident, eager. She stumbled halfway through her explanation, but Peterson smiled kindly and guided her step by step until she found the answer. "Good, Emily. You corrected yourself. That's what learning is about." A few minutes later, Jamal raised his hand. "I think it's—" Before he could finish, Peterson interrupted. "You'll need to wait, Jamal. Let's let someone else try." The boy's hand lowered slowly, his face tightening. Hayes's pen moved once, dismissed. The next volunteer, Brian Tucker, gave a half-right answer. Peterson corrected him quickly, almost impatiently. But when Sarah Chen raised her hand again, her voice small but steady, he ignored her entirely, pacing to the board as if she hadn't spoken. After 20 minutes, Hayes had seen enough. His calm never cracked, but a thin line formed between his brows. The imbalance was unmistakable. "Mr. Peterson," Hayes said suddenly, "why not let Miss Chen attempt the next problem?" Peterson froze for a beat too long. "Of course," he said, gesturing toward her. "Go ahead." Sarah stood, pushed her glasses up, and wrote quickly on the board. Her handwriting was neat, each step clear. When she reached the solution, the answer was flawless. "That's excellent work, Sarah," said Hayes. "Where did you learn that method?" Sarah hesitated, glancing around the room. "Marcus showed me," she said quietly. The room fell still. The name hung in the air like a truth too sharp to swallow. Hayes's gaze returned to Peterson. "I see." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Please, continue your lesson. I'll speak with you afterward." Peterson nodded stiffly. His hand trembled slightly as he picked up the marker. When the class ended, Hayes waited as the students filed out. A few cast uncertain glances at him, sensing that something had shifted in the air. Sarah lingered near the door. "Sarah," Hayes said gently, "thank you for being honest." She nodded. "Marcus didn't cheat. He's just smart. He sees patterns." "I know," Hayes replied, "and soon Mr. Peterson will know too." When the last student left, he closed the door behind them. Peterson remained at his desk, his usual crisp composure slipping just enough to reveal discomfort. "Sit, Greg," Hayes said, setting his clipboard on the desk but not opening it. "Let's talk." Peterson obeyed, folding his hands tightly in his lap. Dr. Hayes, I only wanted to maintain high standards. His performance was inconsistent. Hayes raised a hand. Stop right there. I reviewed Marcus's file last night. His math performance has been in the top percentile since third grade. His standardized test scores have never dropped below 95. So please tell me, what exactly was inconsistent? Peterson looked away. It just seemed unusual. Unusual? Hayes repeated softly. You mean it seemed unusual for a 12-year-old black boy to outperform everyone else? Peterson's head jerked up. That's not what I said. No, Hayes said, but it's what you meant. Silence stretched. The hum of the ceiling vent filled the space between them. Hayes continued, his tone measured. You're an experienced educator. You know the weight your words carry. When you singled Marcus out in front of the class, you didn't just question his grade. You questioned his identity. You told every student in that room what you expect from a boy who looks like him. Peterson's shoulders slumped. I didn't intend. Intentions don't erase impact, Hayes cut in. What matters is what the students heard. What he heard. He opened the folder in front of him and slid a few pages across the desk. Old report cards, letters from teachers, notes from his former mentor, Miss Rodriguez. Every page glowed with consistency, dedication, and excellence. Marcus earned that 98, Hayes said. You didn't even check his work before accusing him, did you? Peterson shook his head. His voice was barely audible. No. Hayes leaned back in his chair, letting that word hang. You owe him an apology, not a vague one, a real one. He's in the library now. You'll go there and speak to him face to face. Peterson swallowed hard. If I do that— When, Hayes corrected. Not if. Peterson nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Hayes stood. And one more thing. You'll also apologize to the class tomorrow. You embarrassed him publicly. You'll make it right publicly. The teacher's throat tightened. Understood. Hayes gathered his notes, closing the folder with a firm but quiet motion. I've been where Marcus is, he said softly. When I was his age, a teacher accused me of plagiarizing an essay because it was too good. Another teacher, my mentor, stood up for me. That's the only reason I stayed in this profession, because one adult decided to believe me. Peterson's eyes flickered with something that looked like shame, or maybe awakening. I never wanted to hurt him, he said. I believe you, Hayes replied. Now prove it. An hour later, the library smelled of paper and dust, quiet but alive. Marcus sat in a corner study room, surrounded by open notebooks. The sunlight through the blinds drew lines across his face, cutting the space into stripes of gold and shadow. He didn't hear the footsteps at first. When the door opened, he looked up and froze. Mr. Peterson stood there, holding nothing. No clipboard, no papers, no authority, only apology. Dr. Hayes remained at the door, silent witness to what had to happen next. Marcus, Peterson began, his voice softer than usual. May I sit? Marcus nodded warily. The teacher sat across from him, folding his hands. I owe you an apology. Yesterday, I accused you of something terrible. I said things that were unfair and untrue. I let my assumptions guide me instead of your work. He hesitated. You didn't deserve that. Marcus stared at him for a moment, eyes steady. You thought I'd cheated because I got a good score, he said quietly. You didn't think I could do it. Peterson's jaw tightened. You're right. I judged before I understood. That's on me. Marcus looked down at his test paper, then back up. I didn't copy anyone. I found a pattern. You can check my notes. Peterson leaned forward as Marcus spread the papers across the table. His neat handwriting filled every line, each calculation logical, each step connected. There was no trick, No shortcut, just brilliance. Peterson's eyes softened. "This is incredible," he said honestly. "How did you figure this out?" Marcus shrugged. "I just noticed something. When the number before x2 is a perfect square, it changes how the equation behaves. So I tested it, and it worked every time." Hayes smiled faintly from the doorway. "That's what gifted thinking looks like, Mr. Peterson." The teacher nodded slowly. "Marcus, would you be willing to teach this to the class tomorrow?" The boy blinked. "Me? Teach?" "Yes," Peterson said. "I think everyone should see how your mind works. If you're comfortable, I'd like to give you that space." Marcus hesitated, then smiled, the first genuine smile since yesterday. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." Peterson stood, extending his hand. "Thank you, Marcus, for giving me a chance to make this right." Marcus shook it, small but firm. "Just don't do it again, to anyone." Hayes's lips curved into a quiet smile. "That's my boy," he thought. As Peterson left the library, Hayes lingered. "Marcus," he said gently, "how are you feeling now?" The boy thought for a moment. "Still mad," he admitted, "but maybe less alone." "That's a good place to start," Hayes said. "Tomorrow you'll show them who you are." Marcus nodded, eyes bright with a quiet fire. That night, under the warm kitchen light, Evelyn Williams listened as Marcus told her everything. The accusation, the apology, the plan for tomorrow. She stirred her tea slowly and said, "See, baby, the truth always finds its voice, even when people try to talk over it." Marcus smiled, leaning his chin on his hands. "Tomorrow's going to be different." "It will be," she said, "because you're different, and that's your power." Outside, the Georgia night pressed against the window, deep and calm. Inside, a boy who had once been silenced was preparing to speak, and to change everything. The next morning, the school corridors seemed unusually quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed above the rows of lockers, and the faint scent of floor wax lingered in the air. Marcus walked with his backpack held close, eyes fixed ahead. The whispers from yesterday had faded, replaced by something heavier. Silence. No one laughed, no one pointed. Everyone knew something had happened between him and Mr. Peterson. He passed the math wing and paused at the door of room 247. Through the small window, he could see his classmates chatting in low voices. The seat where he used to sit, third row near the window, was still empty. For a brief second, he thought about walking in, pretending everything was normal, but his chest tightened and he turned away. Dr. Hayes stood down the hall, waiting for him. "Marcus," he said gently, "good morning." "Morning, sir," Marcus replied, his voice quieter than usual. "Mr. Peterson is in the library," Hayes continued. "He wants to speak with you." "I'll be there too, but I'll let you take your time. You ready?" Marcus nodded, though his throat felt dry. "I guess so." "Remember," Hayes said, laying a reassuring hand on his shoulder, "you didn't do anything wrong. You don't owe anyone shame." They walked together through the long corridor that led to the library. Each step echoed, measured, and deliberate. When they reached the door, Hayes opened it but didn't enter. "He's waiting in study room B," he said. "Take your time, son." Inside, sunlight filtered through the blinds, cutting the quiet space into strips of gold and shadow. Mr. Peterson sat at a small round table, hands clasped, shoulders slightly hunched. His tie was looser than usual, and the sharpness that usually framed his expression was gone. For once, he didn't look like the man in charge of anything. Marcus stood in the doorway, uncertain. "You wanted to see me?" "Yes, Marcus, please, come in." Peterson gestured to the chair across from him. "I owe you something important." Marcus hesitated, then sat down, keeping his backpack close. For a moment, neither spoke. The soft hum of the ceiling fan filled the space between them. Finally, Peterson took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Yesterday, I accused you of cheating. I questioned your integrity, and I did it in front of your classmates. That was unfair and deeply wrong." Marcus stared at him, eyes guarded. "You thought I cheated because I got the highest score," he said slowly. "Yes," Peterson admitted. "And that wasn't because of your work. It was because of my own bias. I saw a result that didn't fit my expectations, and instead of examining my assumptions, I decided it couldn't be right. I let prejudice speak louder than reason." Marcus blinked, trying to process the words. "You didn't even look at my test." Peterson nodded. "You're right. I didn't, and that's what I regret most." For the first time, Marcus's anger started to crack, not gone, but shifting. "You embarrassed me," he said. "Everyone looked at me like I was a liar." Peterson lowered his head. "I know, and I can't take that back, but I can do better from here." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Why did you think I couldn't be good at math?" The question hit like a pulse. Peterson's mouth opened, but the words came out slow. "Because somewhere along the way, I started believing a lie about what brilliance looks like. And that lie hurt you. You deserve more than my regret. You deserve respect." Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out his notebook. "This is the pattern I used," he said, sliding the papers toward him. "The one that made you think I cheated." Peterson hesitated before taking the notebook. The pages were filled with precise calculations, boxed numbers, arrows, and small scribbles of logic. "You wrote all this yourself?" "Every step," Marcus said firmly. "I found something. When the number, before x2 is a perfect square, like 4, 9, or 16, it changes how you can simplify the equation. You can skip half the steps if you recognize it early. I just used that rule." Peterson traced the lines with his finger, reading carefully. This is remarkable," he whispered. "I've never seen it presented this way." "It's just numbers," Marcus said, shrugging slightly. "No," Peterson corrected softly. "It's insight. The kind of insight mathematicians spend years trying to find." Dr. Hayes, standing quietly by the doorway, smiled. "That's what I was trying to tell you yesterday, Greg. You weren't looking at a fluke. You were looking at a gift." Peterson set the notebook down and looked at Marcus again. "If you're willing, I'd like to share this with the class tomorrow, but only if you want to." "Share it?" Marcus frowned. "You mean, like, teach it?" "Yes," said Peterson. "You can show your classmates how you found this pattern. I'll stand beside you, not above you. You'll have the floor." Marcus hesitated. "What if they laugh?" "Then I'll make sure they don't," Peterson said firmly. "You have my word." Hayes stepped closer. "You have a chance to turn yesterday's pain into tomorrow's power," he said. "Are you ready for that?" Marcus took a long breath, then nodded. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." Peterson smiled faintly, the first genuine expression of relief Marcus had ever seen from him. "Thank you," he said. "And I promise, Marcus, I'll never doubt your integrity again." Marcus looked him straight in the eye. "Don't just not doubt me," he said quietly. "Don't doubt kids like me." Peterson's throat tightened. "I won't," he said. "That's a promise." Later that day, Dr. Hayes stopped by the classroom while Peterson was preparing for the next lesson. The once spotless board was now cluttered with half-erased equations, and Peterson stood in front of it, lost in thought. "How did it go?" Hayes asked. Peterson exhaled slowly. Better than I deserved. That boy's remarkable. The way he thinks, it's humbling. Hayes crossed his arms. Good. Tomorrow's your chance to make things right with everyone else. I know, Peterson said. I'll speak to the class before he presents. I want them to see what respect looks like. Hayes studied him for a moment. You've been teaching for 27 years, Greg. Most people in your position would dig in, defend themselves, or make excuses. But you didn't. That's something. Peterson gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Maybe it's time I started learning again. Good teachers never stop, Hayes said. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. By the way, I'll be sitting in tomorrow, not as your evaluator, as your witness. Peterson nodded. I think that's fair. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table under the warm light of the old lamp. His grandmother, Evelyn, set a plate of cornbread and milk in front of him. You've been quiet, baby, she said. How'd it go today? Marcus looked up from his notebook. He apologized. Evelyn's eyebrows lifted slightly. And you believe him? Marcus thought for a moment. Yeah, he said finally. I think he meant it. Evelyn smiled faintly. That's a powerful thing, to see someone change. I'm showing my math thing to the class tomorrow, Marcus added. Mr. Peterson said I could. That's my boy, she said softly, pride flickering behind her tired eyes. You take that gift of yours and make them see what you can do. But don't forget, you don't gotta prove your worth to anyone. I know, Marcus said, though part of him still wanted to. When he finished his homework, he looked at the test on his desk one last time. The red 98 still shone in the corner, but it no longer felt like just a grade. It felt like a reminder of what he'd overcome, of who had believed him, and of what he had to teach the world tomorrow. He closed his notebook, slid it carefully into his bag, and whispered to himself, Tomorrow, they'll see. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows of Riverside Middle School, casting golden lines across the freshly polished floor. The air buzzed with quiet curiosity. Word had spread. Something unusual was going to happen in math class. When Marcus entered room 247, a few heads turned. Some students whispered, others just stared. But this time there was no laughter, no smirks. The usual tension he felt when walking into the room was replaced with an uneasy stillness. Even Mr. Peterson looked different. His posture less rigid, his face softer. Good morning, everyone, Peterson said, his voice steady but humble. Before we begin today's lesson, there's something important I need to say. The class went silent. He placed a stack of papers on the desk and took a deep breath. Yesterday, I was wrong, he began. I made a serious mistake. I accused Marcus Williams of cheating, without proof, without fairness, and without respect. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment, and I hurt a student who deserved better. The room remained still. A few students exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus sat frozen, his hands resting on the desk, his heart thudding in his chest. I've already apologized to Marcus privately, Peterson continued, but that's not enough. I embarrassed him in front of all of you, and so it's only right that I admit my mistake here too. Marcus is one of the most insightful math thinkers I've met in my career, and today he's going to show you why. He turned to Marcus, offering a small nod. If you're ready. Marcus hesitated for a second, then stood up. He felt every eye in the room on him, every breath waiting for him to speak. His palms were sweating, but his grandmother's words echoed in his head. You don't have to prove your worth, but you can show your strength. Okay, he said quietly, picking up the chalk. He stepped to the board, erasing a few old equations and writing his own in quick, confident strokes. His handwriting was neat, clean, deliberate. "So, this is what I figured out," he began. "When the number in front of x2 is a perfect square, the equation behaves differently. You can factor it faster without going through all the long steps." The class watched closely as he wrote. He showed the same example he'd used in his notebook, a quadratic equation with a square coefficient, and broke it down in a way that made sense even to the students who usually struggled. "You see," he said, drawing arrows across the board, "if you look at the pattern, you can predict the answer before expanding everything. It's not magic, it's just recognizing the structure." Jamal raised his hand, curious. "So it's like skipping steps without cheating?" Marcus smiled. "Exactly. You're not skipping, you're seeing further ahead." Sarah Chen nodded eagerly. "That's what he showed me last week. It works every time." Mr. Peterson stood by the desk, arms crossed but not in authority, more in awe. "Marcus," he said quietly, "that's a level of pattern recognition most adults don't have." The class murmured in agreement. Even students who never cared much for math were paying attention now. Marcus turned back to the board, solving a second equation even faster than the first. He paused, then looked at everyone. "I know not everyone likes math," he said, "but I think it's kind of like music. There's rhythm in it, if you listen." For the first time, a few smiles broke out around the room. The tension melted into quiet admiration. When he finished, the class erupted into applause. It wasn't loud or forced, it was genuine. Even Jamal, who usually rolled his eyes at anything academic, was clapping. Mr. Peterson stepped forward. "Marcus," he said softly, "thank you for sharing that. And thank you for your patience with me. You didn't just teach math today, you reminded all of us what learning should look like." Marcus looked down, a shy grin spreading across his face. "Thanks, Mr. Peterson." After class, students gathered around Marcus's desk. Some wanted him to show them the shortcut again, others just wanted to talk. Sarah handed him a folded note with a simple line. "Proud of you." As the last bell rang, Dr. Hayes appeared in the doorway. "Mind if I come in?" he asked. "Of course, Dr. Hayes," Peterson said quickly. Hayes looked around the room. The energy felt different now, lighter, freer. "I just wanted to see how things went," he said, smiling knowingly. Peterson gestured toward Marcus. "Why don't you ask the teacher of the day?" Marcus blushed. "It went good," he said, trying to sound casual. Hayes chuckled. "I can see that. Marcus, you turned a painful moment into something powerful. That's not easy to do." He turned to Peterson. "And Greg, I'm proud of the way you handled this. You didn't hide behind excuses. That takes courage." Peterson nodded. "Thank you. I've been teaching for nearly 3 decades, but today might be the first time I actually learned something new." Hayes nodded approvingly. "That's the beauty of teaching. It changes us too." He turned back to Marcus. "I'll be sending your notes to a colleague of mine at the Georgia Mathematics Review. They're always looking for original ideas from young minds. Would you be okay with that?" Marcus's eyes widened. "For real?" "For real," Hayes said, smiling. "Your discovery deserves to be seen." Peterson clapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Looks like you're going to be published before any of us." Marcus laughed nervously, shaking his head. "I just like finding patterns." "Keep doing that," Hayes said, "because one day those patterns might change the world." That evening, Marcus sat at his desk, the same notebook open in front of him. He had added a new page titled Patterns I Haven't Found Yet. Underneath it, He'd written one sentence: "Learning is about seeing what others overlook." His grandmother, Evelyn, walked in, carrying a small plate of peach cobbler. "That's my boy. Writing again?" "Yeah," Marcus said with a grin. "Dr. Hayes wants to send my math thing to a magazine." Evelyn's eyes lit up. "A magazine? Lord, look at you. I told you those numbers of yours meant something." Marcus took a forkful of cobbler, smiling shyly. "It's not just that. Mr. Peterson said sorry to everyone. I think he really changed." Evelyn sat beside him, resting her hand on his arm. "Sometimes, baby, when people see the truth clear enough, it changes them. You didn't just fix a math problem. You fixed a piece of someone's heart." Marcus looked down at his notebook. "I guess we both learned something." Evelyn smiled warmly. "That's how it works, sugar. The teacher learns from the student, and the student learns from the world." The night air outside was cool, and the sound of crickets filled the silence. Marcus leaned back in his chair, feeling a peace he hadn't known in days. Tomorrow wasn't something to dread anymore. It was something to look forward to. The next day, Dr. Hayes received an email from the editorial board of the Georgia Mathematics Review. They were impressed by Marcus's findings and wanted to include his method in their upcoming issue under a new section called Young Innovators of Math. When Hayes printed the letter and walked into Marcus's classroom later that week, he saw a familiar sight. Peterson smiling, Marcus helping a classmate, and the whole class engaged. It was a different room now. Hayes handed the letter to Marcus quietly. "You earned this," he said. Marcus read the words once, then twice, his eyes wide. "They liked it. They loved it," Hayes said proudly. "You're officially published, young man." The class erupted in cheers. Peterson looked at Hayes, smiling. "You know," he said softly, "I think I just witnessed redemption." Hayes nodded. "Not just his," he said. "Yours, too." The gymnasium at Riverside Middle School had never been this full. Rows of folding chairs stretched to the back walls, filled with students, parents, teachers, and local reporters who had caught wind of a remarkable discovery made by a seventh grader. Balloons in the school's blue and gold colors hung above the stage, and a small banner read, "Celebrating Young Minds." Marcus stood behind the curtain, his heart thudding hard against his ribs. His grandmother, Evelyn, adjusted his tie. Navy blue, slightly crooked but full of love. "You're going to do great, baby," she whispered. "Just talk from your heart, same way you did at the kitchen table." Marcus took a breath. "What if I mess up?" Evelyn smiled, brushing his cheek with her hand. "Messing up means you tried. Standing here means you already won." From behind the curtain, Dr. Hayes appeared. "They're ready for you, Marcus," he said softly. "Take your time. The truth doesn't need to be rushed." Marcus nodded, clutching his notebook. As he stepped into the light, the applause hit him like a wave. Loud, warm, real. He blinked under the bright stage lights and saw the front row. His grandmother, Dr. Hayes, Mr. Peterson, and a crowd of students cheering his name. "Good morning," he began, his voice small but steady. "My name is Marcus Williams, and I want to talk about patterns. How sometimes when things don't make sense, it just means you haven't looked close enough yet." He flipped open his notebook and held up a page filled with equations. "Math used to scare me," he admitted, earning a few chuckles. "But then I realized it's not about numbers, it's about relationships. It's about how things connect." He turned to the whiteboard behind him and began to write. "Here's what I discovered. When the number before x2 is a perfect square, like 4, 9, or 16, you can find shortcuts that lead you to the solution faster. It's like finding a hidden rhythm." As he spoke, the room quieted into awe. Parents leaned forward. Students scribbled notes. Even the teachers in the back, some with gray hair and glasses, looked impressed. Peterson sat in the front row, his hands clasped tightly. He watched every move, every confident word from the boy he once humiliated. His eyes stung, and for a moment he had to look away. Marcus finished solving the problem and turned to face the crowd. "But I didn't come here to talk only about math," he said. "I came to talk about what happens when someone doesn't believe in you and how you keep believing in yourself anyway." A soft murmur spread through the audience. Marcus's voice didn't shake. "Last week," he continued, "I was accused of cheating. I didn't cheat. I just saw something no one else saw. But when someone powerful says you don't belong, it hurts. It makes you doubt yourself." He paused, letting the silence fill the room. "But then Dr. Hayes believed me. My grandmother reminded me who I am. And even Mr. Peterson, he apologized and he changed. And that's what I learned. People can change. Systems can change. But someone has to speak first." The audience erupted in applause. Evelyn wiped a tear from her cheek. Hayes stood with quiet pride, clapping slowly, his eyes shining. When the noise settled, Marcus smiled shyly. "I don't know what I'll be when I grow up, but I know this: whatever I do, I'll keep looking for patterns, because every problem, math or life, has a solution if you don't stop looking." He stepped back, heart racing, and the crowd rose to its feet. A standing ovation filled the hall. Cameras flashed, students cheered, and for a brief, breathtaking moment, Marcus felt the kind of peace that comes only after pain. Peterson approached the stage after the applause softened. "Marcus," he said quietly, offering his hand, "you didn't just teach me math, you taught me humility. I'll never forget that." Marcus shook his hand. "Just keep believing in your students," he said, "even when they surprise you." "I will," Peterson promised. Later that day, the principal's office was filled with light. Dr. Hayes sat at his desk with a printed email in front of him. Marcus and Evelyn sat across from him, the pride in her eyes glowing like sunlight. Hayes looked up. "Well, young man, I have good news. The Georgia Mathematics Review published your work this morning. You're officially one of their youngest contributors." Marcus's eyes widened. "They really did it?" "They did," Hayes said, smiling. "And they added a note about the importance of representation in education. Your story inspired them." Evelyn laughed softly, clutching her purse. "Lord, I told you those numbers were going to take you somewhere." Marcus smiled, still stunned. Can I read it?" Hayes handed him the printout. The title read, "Recognizing Hidden Symmetry, a new shortcut for quadratic equations by Marcus Williams, age 12. He ran his finger over his name, feeling something deep inside shift, a sense of belonging, of being seen. "Dr. Hayes," Marcus said softly, "thank you for believing me." Hayes leaned back, his expression warm. "I didn't believe in you, Marcus. I believed you. There's a difference." Evelyn nodded proudly. "And that's why we need men like you in charge." Hayes chuckled. "Well, I'm just doing what someone once did for me." As the sun set outside, Marcus and Evelyn walked home through the quiet Georgia streets. The evening breeze carried the faint scent of magnolias. "Grandma," Marcus said after a while, "do you think Mr. Peterson's really changed?" Evelyn thought for a moment. "Change ain't a thing you say, baby. It's a thing you do. From what I saw today, he's starting." Marcus smiled. "I think so, too." They reached their small house, paint peeling a little but full of warmth. Marcus paused at the steps. "You know, when he called me a cheater, I thought I'd never want to go back to school again." Evelyn put her arm around his shoulder. "And now?" "Now, I can't wait for Monday," he said with a grin. Evelyn laughed, squeezing him close. "That's my boy." 2 weeks later, the story of Marcus Williams spread across local news outlets. The headline read, "Middle School Students' Math Discovery Sparks Change in Atlanta Education." The article mentioned his publication, the school's diversity training initiative, led by Dr. Hayes, and the new mentorship program that paired older students with younger ones. Mr. Peterson volunteered to lead the first session. When a reporter asked him why, he said simply, "Because I almost lost one of the brightest minds I've ever taught, and I won't let that happen again." At the end of year assembly, Dr. Hayes took the stage. "Today," he said, "we celebrate more than grades or trophies. We celebrate growth, the kind that begins in the heart and spreads to others." He turned to Marcus, who sat in the front row, holding his certificate. "Marcus Williams, you reminded us what education is for, to see potential where others might overlook it. For that, we thank you." The crowd cheered again, and Marcus stood up humbled and proud. He looked around the auditorium, the same place where he'd once felt invisible. Now every face looked back at him with respect, and as the applause echoed, Marcus realized that truth wasn't something you shouted, it was something you lived. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in second chances. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive.